This episode of Writing Excuses has been brought to you by our listeners, patrons, and friends. If you would like to learn how to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/writingexcuses. Season 20, Episode 10. This is Writing Excuses.
Interview with Chuck Tingle, Breaking the Rules.
I'm Mary Robinette.
I'm Dong Wan.
And I'm Howard.
And we are joined today by our special guest, Chuck Tingle, who, let me just say, as we start off, I'm so happy to have you here because love is real.
Well, you want to know why I'm happy to be here? Along with that, I think there's some buckaroos that believe we are one and the same, or at least about a decade ago did. I guess this kind of clears it up unless you have a little soundboard and you're flipping between voice modulations. But I think this is pretty good evidence that we are two separate entities.
That would be a pretty impressive deep fake.
Yeah.
Very talented performer. So
Yes. It's amazing. You're actually my cat. But for readers who are unfamiliar with you, would you mind telling them just a little bit about some of what you write and who you are?
Yes, so I started off self-publishing erotica. I still do that. I have about 350 erotica shorts called Tinglers. And then I recently have signed a deal with Nightfire, which is part of Tor, part of Macmillan, for traditionally published horror novels. And the second of which just came out. And then I just announced that I got 4 more coming. So, yeah.
This is
That's awesome.
This is very, very fantastic. I became aware of you first because of your erotica, and then when I started seeing that you were going to be doing traditionally published things, the assumption that I made was that it was going to be similar to what you were doing. And the reason that we have you in to talk about breaking the rules is that your path to publishing traditionally is extremely unconventional. But the other thing is that you are ignoring a piece of conventional wisdom, which is that you are supposed to put yourself into a niche and stay in that niche. And if you're going to do 2 different niches, that you need to have pseudonyms for those.
Yes. Yeah, so, I think pretty much everything about my career has been pretty untraditional, unconventional, and the writing itself, I think there's a lot of rules that I break, and it is something that I like to talk about because I think there's a lot of buckaroos out there who are creatives, not just writers, but in any sort of medium, who kind of get discouraged if they don't fall into a specific path of kind of traditional creativity. And there's a reason for a lot of those paths. I mean, obviously, like there is a system to getting a publishing deal and everything. But I like to talk about my own journey because, there are some really incredible things that happen if you kind of chart your own path. Sometimes that can lead to astonishing failure, and sometimes that can lead to something really beautiful, and not just beautiful, but kind of push mediums forward sometimes. I mean, that's such an important role out there. And so, I just think it's important to talk about and not discourage those that think, well, that's not how I think, because there's any number of ways to approach art.
Yeah.
This is any number of ways to approach art is something that is like a flag that I will ride to. You have my sword. One of the things we're fond of saying here at Writing Excuses is tools, not rules. And
yes.
I think that that's one of the things when you're talking about art, that there isn't a right way to approach it because we're all coming from a different point.
Yes.
And one thing I wanted to pick up on in there too was, Chuck, you mentioned the possibility of astonishing failure, I think is how you put it. And, one of the things I love about you bringing that up immediately is it's such a possibility in any creative endeavor, any artistic endeavor, and learning to not be afraid of that failure, but to also embrace it as an opportunity to learn more and explore and discover what works for you and what doesn't work for you. For me, I think is incredibly important. But to start out almost like on the negative, the downbeat note, almost like, what are those moments of failure that you've run into that you found instructive for you in terms of figuring out how you wanted to move forward? What were the paths that made sense to you?
That is a great question, and you've caught me a little bit because I use that. Well, I use that word because we're communicating through words. It's semantics. We are speaking. We need a word to put value to an idea. But if you were to really dive deep, and I guess that's what we're doing here, get philosophical about it, I kind of think an art failure doesn't actually exist. I'm using the word to make a point, but in reality, when I look at the process of any career, but I'm just going to talk about my own, anytime, let's say I had a Tingler that came out that I thought was going to do really well and then didn't, failure is the best word for it because we all know what that means. But if you actually look at it, that is literally just, that is a learning opportunity. It is an experience. It is honestly the stuff that life on this timeline is made of. It is so beautiful. In fact, it's equally beautiful to success. So it is, if I'm really going to get in touch with the depths of my feeling about it, I don't think that it exists. It's part of the process. Making great art is not just some trajectory upward into the sky like a rocket. It is a river that flows in various directions, and all of that is important. It's equally important, I think.
To paraphrase badly Mahatma Gandhi, be the try-fail cycle you want to see in a good book. It's
absolutely.
We see this in all of the things that we consume as entertainment. We see this idea of a try-fail cycle. As long as the failure is not something that stops you completely, it can be part of a process that leads to the success that you were aiming for.
Yes.
This is a thing that I love, is the part of a process. There's a thing in film and television where you only need to get the perfect shot once, right? When you're watching the Muppets, they fling puppets all the time, and there's this outtake reel that I love from Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, where they need a drum to roll out of a store, and it rolls out of the store and fails so many different times in different hysterically funny ways. This blooper reel is now one of my very favorite things, but they only needed to get it right once. And I think one of the wonderful things about writing is that you can try something and you don't have to put it out into the world until you have successfully gotten the drum to roll the way you want it to roll. And then even if someone is like, whatever, that drum is not perfect for me, it's like, well, that's fine.
Yes. I also tend to believe that the quote wrong way of the drum to roll is actually more perfect than the quote perfect one. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that with art, a lot of the things, like for me, it's not about capturing the perfect story. It's about capturing the truth of the moment that it's written. That's the goal for me. So Tinglers are a perfect example of that. I think of my writing, specifically with Tinglers, as like punk rock writing. If you look at other mediums, if you look at like music, for instance, if you have a song and you play it a little too fast and it's a little out of tune and it's a little sloppy, someone will listen back and say, wow, that's a perfect punk rock song. And if you do that in painting, you can say, oh, that there's something like you really captured the movement or the emotion or something if you don't fix those mistakes. In writing, for whatever reason, I have just found that there's a strictness that I kind of like to push back against. So the mistakes like spelling errors or things in my erotica shorts, I don't even see those as errors. I see them as punk. It is capturing the moment that it was made. A lot of those I write in 24 hours about a news item, and the idea that I should make it seem like it wasn't written in 24 hours just seems silly to me. It's a piece of art, and I'm capturing the moment. So I kind of like to look outside of the conventions of any sort of genre, but specifically, the medium of writing, and think, well, what do these quote mistakes actually mean if we're actually just trying to capture the moment?
Yeah, there's a thing we say in puppetry, I think other places too, but if you can't fix it, feature it.
Oh, beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
And as a cartoonist, I'm fond of saying that art for art's sake is allowed to take its time. Art for money has to run like it stole something.
That's a great one too.
It's because the mistakes isn't the right word. That first stroke you throw down with a pen has an energy to it, an enthusiasm to it that repeated strokes trying to get it right won't have. And so, boy, sometimes you just gotta roll with the first take.
I feel like there is a joke right here about repeated strokes and tinglers, but
there you go. Now, just wait until this episode comes out and you see a fresh tingler directly referencing writing excuses.
Oh my goodness! Anytime we're talking about things coming out, it's always exciting for me.
Yes.
But before we do anything more on that, I think we're going to take our pause as I break my co-podcasting.
We're fine. We're all fine.
We're fine. So let's take our pause for a thing of the week.
So going with the theme of this episode of breaking the rules, and as a writing excuses fan myself, I listen all the time. I have yet to hear anyone recommend food. And so I would like to recommend the Frankenstand, which for anyone either living in Los Angeles or visiting Los Angeles, it is a vegan hot dog stand that serves horror-themed hot dogs. So every week you show up and you're not sure what you're going to get. Maybe the Mummy with the nice pale Alfredo drizzled across the top, wrapped up. You could get the Swamp Thing, which is more like a chili dog. There's all kinds of things, and it's just really incredible. It's you have to follow them on Instagram to find out where they're going to be. Normally, they are Sundays in front of a horror shop called the Mystic Museum out in the dang valley. And so my thing of the week is a delicious vegan horror-themed hot dog at the Frankenstand, and their Instagram is the Frankenstein.
As a new resident of Los Angeles, I am excited to go and track this one down and see what they have to offer.
And I am thinking that anyone who is coming on the Writing Excuses cruise that is cruising out of Los Angeles in September is probably also going to make a slight detour to the...
Oh, there you go. You've got to get a haunt dog. That's what they call them. Not hot dogs, haunt dogs.
This is amazing to me.
I've had some haunt dogs that I felt haunted by. So
yes.
Writing doesn't have to be a solitary activity. That's why we host in-person retreats and workshops. At the Writing Excuses retreats, you'll get access to classes, one-on-one office hours, critique sessions, and activities to keep you inspired and motivated. Become a more engaging storyteller and learn how to navigate the publishing landscape. As you make meaningful progress on your stories, you'll also build connections with your fellow writers that will last for years to come. Check out our upcoming events at writingexcuses.com/retreats.
All right. So as we come back in, I want to talk about some of the rules that you feel like other people get trapped by that you just kind of stomped over with great joy and enthusiasm?
Wow. Well, I feel like there's two categories of that. There are the rules of kind of the business side of things. Mm-hmm. There's the rules of the creative side of things. I think, part of both of these is that, while I am a masked buckaroo, it's funny, in the introduction, we didn't even mention that, but for those listeners not familiar, I am anonymous and I wear a pink bag over my head. And I would say that, just to list a few, the way I do book tours is certainly different. Yeah. I don't do readings because really they didn't make sense to me. I thought if you're trying to get new readers, what are you going to do? Show up and talk about a book that nobody's read and have spoilers? I found it to be kind of fundamentally broken. So I do my own thing with some shows. I think that in the creative side of things, I kind of disagree with the idea that you should only show, never tell. I think that you need to do both, which you've actually done an episode on that was pretty wonderful. So any listeners, go back to that one. There's this whole discussion of sort of, should you write with character or plot is the big thing of who's in the driver's seat. And I think most of the time you're supposed to say character. And I would argue that I like to write message first. I always put the message in the driver's seat. Kind of what am I delivering to the reader? What is the gift of this? And then I would say probably character second and then plot. So there's all these things that I come at it with. And to come back to the anonymous thing, many buckaroos have tried to guess my real identity. And over time, I have kind of, I'm breaking down the layers. But I will say for those listening, because I have said this before, that many assume that I am like a writer under a different pen name, but I am not, which I think becomes apparent. I mean, I'm a writer now, but coming into this, I did not know this industry at all, which I guess moves on to the kind of the business side of things, which Dong Wan, my agent, who happens to be here,
shocking
coincidence,
experienced firsthand, which is just kind of, I think that my path, I've learned sense about the querying and all that stuff, and actually, I wrote the book. I wrote Camp Damascus, and then I went on Twitter and said, I have a book, and I think I'd like a traditional publisher. Does anyone want to put it out?
Literally just tweeted it out.
Yes, I just tweeted it, and then old Macmillan said, I guess that's a good one. Let's do that. That is the short version. It's more entertaining. You could also look at it like I spent, 8 years building my fan base, writing erotica, creating kind of this whole thing outside of the books itself. I prefer the short version because I think it's funny, but I love
the short version.
The short version is very fun.
But I have a question for you, which is, you came into this, you're saying that you didn't know much about the publishing industry, and yet years ago you started writing the Tinglers and putting them up, as self-published. What was the thing that led you to that choice, right? Like when you were starting, before you knew what the rules even were, before you knew that you were breaking any, what was the thing that got you to say, hey, I want to write these, I'm going to put them up here, here's how I'm going to do it. And then, you've developed a very distinctive style since then, of course, but
yes,
what was that inception there?
So I always have, I have been a creator my whole life. And I just thought as a medium that the fact that you could self-publish something and kind of work through an idea, and it could be out in 24 hours and have an audience, I found to be pretty fascinating and also kind of underused in the sense of like hey, if this works, I could talk about current events. I could express myself in this way. I would say that there was a sort of a personal kind of version of that and a political version. The personal version was that, I am on the autism spectrum. So I am neurotypically masking all the time. And the idea of being able to create this art in, like I said, a punk rock way, where I said, well, I'm just going to, my autism really shows itself in how I organize things. I'm so strict about things. And I thought, well, if I have 24 hours or I want to write these quickly, I'm not going to have time for that. And it's going to be kind of therapeutic, which it very much ended up being. And then also my queerness as a bisexual buckaroo in a hetero presenting relationship. Actually, I thought I don't get to express my queerness very often. So there were kind of therapeutic personal reasons that I suspected would be very helpful for me and ended up literally changing my life. So that was a good guess. And then politically speaking, the kind of crux of the idea was that I was always fascinated by conservatives. There was this line a long time ago, kind of the gay marriage line was, well, if we let two buckaroos marry, what's next? Are they going to marry 3 trees? Or are they going to marry their sentient automobile? And I always thought...
they're already marrying their cars.
Yeah, well, there you go. I always thought that kind of slippery slope argument, it was always kind of trotted out like this dystopian landscape. And every time they said it, even back then, I thought, that sounds wonderful. What a utopia. So part of writing Tinglers as like a larger piece of all these books was, what if I just wrote about this world where that conservative nightmare was kind of just let it run wild and show that that's actually more of a utopia than a dystopia. And so those were the 2 pieces where I thought, okay, writing these quick shorts is going to be an interesting way to do that. Let's see if it can work. And it did.
You got to be the slippery slope you want to see in the world.
It's fascinating to me that your path to publishing, you broke rules. But now we look at, self-pub to trad pub, and that's not really rule breaking so much as it is a road less traveled.
Yes.
25 years ago, when I started putting Schlock Mercenary on the internet, it was the same sort of thing. It was very rule breaking. Web comics were this new thing, and now you look at them and everybody knows what that is. Oh, it's a web comic. And so in part, I think some of the pattern here may be that if you break rules, or if you break from a form, if you break from a process and do something in a new way and succeed, the next generation is going to treat that as an accepted form, an accepted pattern, an established way of accomplishing things.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I hope the lesson they can take goes one step beyond that, too, which is, I hope another generation or listeners to this thinking, well, how am I going to break into it? Not only could you say, well, I could trot the path that Chuck did, but the broader idea of I could just come at this from a totally different angle, something that Chuck has never thought of. That, it's like, that is the beauty of art right there. And so I would love to encourage others to do that. And I'm so proud that it has kind of worked out into a career that supports itself by kind of trotting this outsider path. And thank you, Dongwon, for being a part of that.
Thank you for letting me be part of it. In terms of, you spent all that time building your profile, having a career, doing the Tinglers, building that audience. You built what you built outside of the traditional rules of publishing, even outside the rules of like indie publishing, right? Like even on the indie side, people weren't doing what you were doing in terms of this like punk rock methodology of writing, in terms of like doing it in 24 hours, embracing the medium itself as part of what your message is. What then made you pivot again into sort of breaking through all of those rules now into doing something with a traditional publisher, right? Like in terms of making that move, well, why put yourself back in all the boxes that traditional publishing creates and loves to reinforce and loves to build around all of us?
So this is kind of, I guess that's a great question, and why I encourage others. Like you can trot the traditional path, but like I said, you can break off. And the one thing I think breaking off really has going for it is that if you get the opportunity, if it resonates with this timeline and means something to buckaroos, then when you do want to reach more through a traditional means, you can enter that conversation in a completely different way than most are used to, because you come at it as a sort of equal. I wanted to do traditional publishing because I knew that I had the ability and the strength, because of my own situation, that I could come in and make sure I only signed a deal with someone who would also let me do my Tinglers, who would listen to exactly what I say and kind of, treat me as sort of like a auteur author almost, where it's, I am very involved in every aspect of it, where I think some other authors might not be, as far as, let's say, cover decisions or edits or things, because at this point in my career, it's like, why would you sign a deal with Chuck Tingle and not want him to write a Chuck Tingle book? Yep. So I'm allowed to basically do whatever I want as if I was self-published, but with this massive company behind me, because I've already proven it. And I think there's something with not just with publishing, but with all types of mediums, where the hopefuls who want to be a career artist almost see it as a lotto ticket. And I think that's a very unfortunate way to look at it, because you're essentially like begging someone to notice for you. Never come to the big record label, the giant film studio, the big 5 publisher saying, please, please notice me. Come to them as an equal. I always think back to the show American Idol, where everyone was competing for a, quote, record deal. And it always blew my mind, because I would see it and think, well, what's the deal? What is the record deal? Is it a good one? Is it a bad one? Why are we competing for this nebulous idea that is not a good thing inherently? And I feel like in book publishing too, you see that of like, if I could only get this big 5 publishing deal, what big 5 publishing deal? Is it going to be a good one or a bad one?
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things that you said about coming to the table as an equal is something that that people just don't, they get hung up on the dream, and it's something that you don't have to have a huge platform already to bear in mind, that publishers exist to publish things. They do not exist without your work.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. It's almost a mentality. It doesn't have to be, you just have to go and be willing, go into it and think, if I don't like this deal, I'll say no, because I'm a great writer, and so few buckaroos seem to do that.
The way I frame it is, you have to be undeniable, right? Because if you are deniable, they will deny you, right?
Yes.
And part of being undeniable is being willing to walk away from a thing that may be what you've dreamed of, but is on bad terms, or isn't with the right partner, or at the wrong time, right? All of those things, all of us here know too well, can really derail you in a variety of ways. And so it's not just reaching for a literary agent or a book deal or a opportunity. It has to be the right one. And the way you get the right one is by manufacturing, by creating it, right? Like, playing within the boundaries of how people expect you to behave won't always get you there. I mean, now you have to be respectful. You have to treat people, with courtesy and respect, and on the terms that they are requesting for a variety of different reasons. But provided you're living up to civility and treating people like people, you don't have to conform to the expected channels. Like, most of my clients did not come to me through the querying process, right? Most of my clients, in one way or another, didn't end up in the same sort of set of traditional rules that we talk about in terms of how you get a book deal, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, and what publishers are looking for a lot is the thing that Chuck is delivering, which is a book that no one else could have written.
Absolutely.
And I think that when we get hung up in rules, when we get hung up in this is the way things are done, what we're doing is that we are putting ourselves into boxes, and that we're trimming off the pieces of ourselves that don't fit into those boxes. And those pieces are often the things that make our work the most interesting. When Howard was using the metaphor of, that first initial rough sketch, and then you draw over and over and over again, I see early career writers editing themselves out of the story in an effort to meet all of the rules.
Which is why the rawness of the Tinglers works so well, right? You mentioned that you lead with message, not with character or plot. You lead with message, but then you also made the medium itself the message. Like, for you, how is leading with message driving what you choose to work on and how you write and how you publish?
Yes. I have always looked at art as more than what's between the, for the example of writing, it's more than just the words in the book. And I think it really drives, I have found authors do not like this, but I'm going to go there. There is a sort of thing of like, well, I just want to write the books. I don't want to have to be a brand. I'm sure you probably have 10 episodes of this dang podcast about it. Fortunately for me, I have always loved that, because I don't think that there's I don't think that art ever stops when the medium ends. I think when you reach the last page of the book, the art is in what you dream of that night when you go to bed. It's in what you eat for dinner. I think that the song doesn't end when the track stops. It's everything that you know about that singer. It's everything that you don't know about that singer. It's so this idea of art in a vacuum, I think, is really held on tight by a lot of writers who are thinking, well, I don't want to have to be anything else. And being something else, not being something else, that in itself is a statement. But fortunately for me, I always thought, wow, how many different ways can I find to make art more than just the product, more than just the book? How can I make it everything that's around it? How can I show it's not in a vacuum? And so I just spent a lot of time doing that because I love it. I kind of just got lucky in that. Fortunately for me, in an office, they call that branding. For me, I call it art.
I feel like
for me, I call that just being alive.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah. I think this is a great opportunity for us to go ahead and move to our homework, because otherwise we will be talking for several hours. And Chuck, I think you have some homework for us.
I do have some homework. So whatever your work in progress is, find a section, whether it's a chapter or just a page, and think of the writing rule that you believe is kind of the North Star of sort of not necessarily your personal rule, but the writing at large, the English department would hammer into you. Take that rule, whatever you think it may be, and try to rewrite that section either without that rule or doing the opposite, and then look at it and see what change does that make. Is there a version of it where you can use this as a tool, not a rule?
I love that homework. Thank you so much for joining us, Chuck.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. And before I go, I just got to say, it is truly an honor. I came to this, like I said, not knowing anything about writing, and actually listening to this podcast taught me a lot. So I am so honored to be here, and I love it. So it's really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, you all have heard that here. So now you are out of excuses. Go write.
Writing Excuses has been brought to you by our listeners, patrons, and friends.
Your hosts for this episode of Writing Excuses were Dongwon Song, Howard Taylor, and Mary Robinette Kowal, with special guest Chuck Tingle.
This episode was engineered by Marshall Carr Jr., mastered by Alex Jackson, and produced by Emma Reynolds. For more information, visit writingexcuses.com.